My name is Enzi, and I am 28 years old. The night my apartment burned down, everything I believed about family, safety, and love collapsed faster than the walls around me. I remember standing barefoot on the cold pavement at 2:17 a.m., wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching orange flames swallow the place where I had lived for 5 years. Smoke clawed at my throat, sirens screamed like warnings I had ignored my whole life, and all I could think was that my entire world had just turned into ash. When the firefighters finally pushed me back and told me there was nothing left to save, my hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Instinctively, I called the people who were supposed to catch me when I fell, my parents. My mother didn't even pick up. My dad answered on the third ring, his voice irritated, half asleep. I told him my apartment burned down. I told him I had nowhere to go. There was a pause, then he said the words that still echo in my head. "Not our problem. You should have been more careful." I stood there frozen, the fire reflected in my eyes, realizing that when my apartment burned down and I called my parents, my dad said exactly that, "Not our problem." He hung up before I could even cry. People around me whispered. A firefighter asked if I had someone to stay with, and I lied and said yes because saying no felt too humiliating. I spent that night on a metal bench outside the building, watching smoke rise into the sky, replaying my father's words again and again. The next morning, when the sun came up, the ruins looked even worse. Everything I owned, my clothes, photos, documents, my grandmother's necklace, gone. The fire investigator arrived later that day, a calm man with tired eyes who asked me careful questions. He said the fire didn't look accidental. He asked if I had any enemies, any recent arguments, any electrical issues. Then he asked something that made my stomach drop. "Do you know who had access to your apartment last week?" My mind went blank, then one answer surfaced, unwanted and sharp. My parents. They had a spare key. They always insisted on keeping one just in case, even after I moved out years ago. I hadn't thought about it because why would I? Parents don't burn down their child's home. At least that's what I used to believe. I told the investigator the truth, feeling ridiculous even saying it out loud. He nodded slowly, wrote something down, and thanked me. Before leaving, he said they would be checking security cameras from nearby buildings. Sometimes, he added quietly, what the security cameras reveal leaves even me speechless. That sentence stuck with me all day. I tried calling my parents again, thinking maybe they'd cooled down. Maybe my dad hadn't meant it. This time my mother answered, her tone sharp. She said I was being dramatic, that accidents happen, that I should learn to stand on my own 2 feet. When I asked if I could stay with them for a few nights, she laughed and said their guest room was being renovated. I later found out it wasn't. I ended up sleeping on a friend's couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to rest. Memories I had buried started resurfacing, how my parents always treated me like a burden, how nothing I did was ever enough, how love always came with conditions. Over the next few days, the investigator called me twice with more questions. Each call made my chest tighten. He asked about family conflicts, money issues, and whether anyone close to me might benefit from the fire. I didn't want to say it, but the truth pressed against my ribs. My parents and I had argued recently about my independence. They hated that I refused to move back home, that I wouldn't hand over my savings, that I had finally learned to say no. The day before the fire, my father had shown up unannounced, angry, demanding I let him inspect my place. I hadn't let him in. That detail suddenly felt terrifying. On the 4th day after the fire, the investigator called again and asked me to come to the station. His voice was serious, different from before. As I sat across from him in a small gray room, he slid a still image across the table. It was grainy but clear enough. A familiar figure stood outside my apartment building late at night. Hood pulled low, holding something metallic. My heart started racing because I recognized that posture, that walk. The investigator didn't say anything yet. He just watched my face as the truth began to take shape in my mind. In that moment, I realized my apartment didn't just burn down, it was taken from me. And the people who were supposed to protect me might be the ones who lit the match. When the fire investigator finally said my father's name out loud, it felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I stared at the still image again, my hands numb. my mind screaming that this couldn't be real, even though every instinct inside me knew it was. The investigator leaned back and repeated the question he had asked on the phone, days earlier, the one that was now burned into my memory. Do you know who had access to your apartment last week? This time there was no hesitation, no denial left to cling to. I nodded slowly, my throat tight, and whispered that my parents had a spare key. He told me the security cameras from a nearby pharmacy and a parking garage had captured footage from the night of the fire. A man matching my father's build and walk entered my building just minutes before. Smoke was first reported. Another camera showed him leaving in a hurry, tossing something into a trash bin 2 blocks away. What the security cameras revealed didn't just leave the investigator speechless. It shattered the last excuse I had made for my parents. I remembered every cold word my dad had ever thrown at me. Every time my mother said I owed them for being born, and suddenly their reaction to the fire made horrifying sense. When my apartment burned down and I called my parents and my dad said, "Not our problem. You should have been more careful." It wasn't cruelty and shock. It was confidence. He already knew exactly what had happened. The investigator explained that they believed the fire was deliberately set using an accelerant. He said charges were likely. I left the station in a fog, my legs carrying me without my permission, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. That night, my phone rang again. It was my father. His voice was calm, almost amused. He asked how I was holding up. I asked him one simple question: why? There was silence. Then he sighed and said I had become ungrateful, that the apartment had made me arrogant, independent in a way he didn't approve of. He said if I couldn't appreciate my parents, I didn't deserve nice things. I hung up shaking, my hands slick with sweat, finally understanding that love, to him, had always been about control. A week later, my parents were formally questioned. My mother cried and claimed ignorance, but the footage didn't lie. The trash bin held remnants of a lighter, and gloves with traces of the same accelerant found in my apartment. Friends who once told me, "But they're your parents," stopped saying it. The truth was too ugly to soften. As the case moved forward, something unexpected happened inside me. The fear slowly turned into clarity. I realized that losing my apartment had stripped me down to nothing. But it had also burned away the lies I had lived with for 28 years. I stopped blaming myself. I stopped wondering what I could have done better to deserve love. I started rebuilding, piece by piece, with people who chose me without conditions. When the investigator called one last time to tell me the charges were official, I didn't cry. I thanked him. After we hung up, I sat in silence, thinking about how fire destroys, but it also exposes. It reveals what was hidden behind walls. My parents tried to erase my independence, to punish me for becoming my own person, and in doing so, they lost me forever. Today, I'm in a small new place, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I lock the door every night and sleep, peacefully knowing the truth is no longer chasing me. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told your pain isn't valid, that your suffering is not their problem, remember this: sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you exactly how strong you are. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel seen or reminded you that justice can come in unexpected ways, make sure you subscribe to True Revenge Glory, because these stories don't just entertain. They remind us that even when everything burns, the truth always survives.